The diner smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. Abigail wiped down the same table for the third time that morning, her reflection caught in the chrome napkin dispenser showing tired eyes and a forced smile. 28 years old, a bachelor's degree in literature gathering dust somewhere, and here she was, serving eggs and enduring contempt disguised as small talk. "More coffee, sweetie." The woman at table 6 didn't look up from her phone. She never did. Just pushed her empty cup toward the edge, expecting Abigail to understand. "No, please. No, thank you. Just casual entitlement." Abigail poured carefully, her hand steady despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones. 3 jobs. This diner from 6 to 2, the bookstore from 3 to 8, weekend shifts at the community center teaching kids to read. It still wasn't enough. Medical bills didn't care about effort. Her mother's dialysis treatments didn't negotiate. "You're awfully slow today," the woman remarked, still not looking up. Her companion, a man in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Abigail made in 2 months, snickered. "Maybe she's not getting enough tips to motivate her." They both laughed. That particular kind of laughter that said they knew exactly how cruel they were being. Abigail's jaw tightened, but she smiled. Always smile. The customer is always right, even when they're wrong in every way that matters. When they left, they pushed a handful of coins across the table. 63 cents for an hour of refills and substitutions. Abigail collected the coins without counting them. She'd learned not to. "Don't let them get to you." Marcus, the cook, called through the service window. He was 62, had worked at this diner for 30 years. "They're miserable people trying to make themselves feel bigger by making you feel smaller." "I know," Abigail said, though knowing didn't make it easy. The door opened, bells chiming. 3 men entered. The first 2 were large, wearing dark suits that fit too well to be anything but custom-made. They moved with awareness, eyes scanning the room. Behind them came a 3rd man, and when he stepped into the fluorescent lighting, something in the atmosphere shifted. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. But it wasn't the clothes or obvious wealth that made her pause. It was his eyes. Gray-blue, cold as winter, assessing everything with calculation that suggested he was always 3 steps ahead. Andrei Volkov. She didn't know his name yet, but she would remember this moment as the point where her life diverged. The 2 larger men took positions near the door and window. The gray-eyed man walked directly to the corner booth, the one with a clear view of both entrances. He sat with his back to the wall. "I'll take this one," Jessica, another waitress, said quickly, already smoothing her hair. "Did you see that suit?" Abigail was content to let her have it. She had 4 more hours and a mountain of weariness pressing down. Men who looked like that usually wanted to be served by women who looked like Jessica. She watched as Jessica approached with her brightest smile. The man didn't look at her. His gaze was on the menu, but Abigail had the distinct impression he wasn't actually reading it. Jessica's smile faltered. She said something Abigail couldn't hear. The man responded without looking up. Jessica nodded, wrote something, and walked back with a flush creeping up her neck. "He wants you," she told Abigail, resentment in her voice. "Specifically requested the black waitress with the tired eyes and honest face. Those were his exact words." Abigail's stomach tightened. But refusing wasn't an option, not when the manager was already looking their way. She approached the corner booth with caution. Up close, he was even more unsettling, not threatening in any obvious way, but because of the stillness he carried. Most people fidgeted. This man was perfectly controlled, every gesture deliberate. "Good morning," Abigail said, voice steady. "What can I get for you?" He looked up, and the full force of those gray-blue eyes landed on her. He studied her face for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then he spoke, his accent carrying faint traces of Eastern Europe. "Coffee, black, eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter, and your name." The last part wasn't a question. "Abigail." "Abigail," he repeated. "You've been working here for 2 years and 4 months. You arrive on time every day. You never call in sick. You have 2 other jobs and a mother who requires regular medical care. You graduated summa cum laude with a degree in English literature. You've never been arrested, never defaulted on a loan, and you volunteer at a community center teaching literacy every Saturday morning." The notepad slipped from Abigail's fingers. Every word was true, each fact a violation of privacy she hadn't granted. "Who are you?" "Someone who makes it his business to know things. Sit down, Abigail, we need to talk." She should walk away, call the police, but something. She sat, perching on the edge, ready to run. "What do you want?" "To offer you a choice." He pulled a check from his wallet and placed it between them. $10,000 made out to her name. I don't understand. Your mother's medical bills exceed $47,000. This check covers 1/5 of what you owe. Consider it a signing bonus. For what? Abigail's voice came out harsh, suspicious. I'm not interested in whatever arrangement you think you're offering. I'm not propositioning you. I'm hiring you to be seen with me, in public, at specific events. You'll accompany me to dinners, gallery openings, charity functions. In return, I'll pay you $3,000 per appearance. Your mother's medical bills will be settled within 4 months. Why me? Because people in my circles talk. They have agendas and alliances. You have none of those things. You're an outsider. And because when those people left you 63 cents, you collected it with dignity instead of anger. That tells me you understand control, which is valuable. He'd been watching. And if I say no, then you say no. The check is yours regardless, but this offer won't come again. $10,000. Enough to breathe for the first time in 2 years, but there was danger here. This man represented a world she'd only glimpsed in news reports. I need to think about it. You have until I finish breakfast. After that, the offer expires. Abigail walked toward the kitchen. Marcus poured her coffee. She told him what had happened. He listened, his weathered face creasing with concern. Men like that don't make offers without good reason, he said carefully. Sometimes the safe choice keeps you safe but stuck. Sometimes you have to risk the unknown. Just go in with your eyes open. She returned to the booth. I'll do it, but I have conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Nothing illegal, nothing that puts my mother at risk, and I want a contract. Agreed. The first event is Friday night, a charity gala. I'll send a car at 6. Your only job is to arrive, stay by my side, smile appropriately. Can you do that? Yes. Good. He stood, leaving cash and the check. One more thing, the people you'll meet are accomplished at reading deception, so when you're with me, you're not pretending to be comfortable. You are comfortable, the role becomes reality, do you understand? I understand. I doubt that, but you will. The next 2 days passed in a blur. The contract arrived. 14 pages of legal language, compensation clear, termination clause allowing either party to end with 2 weeks' notice. Abigail signed. The dress arrived. Midnight blue silk with shoes that fit perfectly despite her never providing her size. Someone had done their research. Friday arrived. Precisely 6, a black car pulled up. The driver opened the door without greeting. Andre was already inside, dressed in black formal wear. They rode in silence before he spoke. Nervous? Yes. Good, nervous people are careful, but don't let it show. When we arrive, you take my arm. If someone asks how we met, you tell them we were introduced by a mutual friend at a bookstore. If they ask what you do, you tell them you work in education and literacy. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Why would anyone make me uncomfortable? The people who attend these events are comfortable because they've learned to make others uncomfortable. They'll try it with you, especially because you're with me. The car pulled up to the museum. Even from inside, Abigail could see the crowd, the flash of cameras. Her stomach clenched. Abigail. Andre's voice cut through her panic. Look at me. You belong here. Not because of the dress or anything I've provided. You belong because you're intelligent and more resilient than 90% of the people inside. Remember that when they try to make you feel small. It was the first personal thing he'd said. Abigail took a breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded. The driver opened her door. Andre exited first, then offered his hand. Camera flashes exploded. They passed through security into the grand hall, and Abigail felt the weight of 100 assessing gazes. They're staring, she murmured. They're curious. Let them wonder. The evening unfolded like a surreal dream. Andre introduced her to people whose names she'd forget by morning. Everyone treated Andre with deference that bordered on fear, and Abigail found herself falling into the role. She smiled when appropriate, spoke when addressed. The illusion was so complete she almost forgot it was an illusion. You're doing well, Andre said during a quiet moment. Better than I expected. Was that a compliment? An observation? I don't do compliments. They create expectations I prefer to avoid. Then what do you do? I appreciate competence, and you're proving exceptionally competent. Before Abigail could respond, a woman approached. Beautiful in that maintained way, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Abigail's apartment. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Andre, darling, who is this lovely creature? Abigail, this is Katerina Volkov, my stepmother. Katerina's smile sharpened. Does this one know what she's gotten herself into, or is she still operating under the illusion that you're capable of genuine human connection? Careful, Katerina, you're addressing someone under my protection. Of course. You're always so protective of your acquisitions, until you're not. Katerina turned to Abigail. A word of advice, dear. Men like Andre don't form attachments, they form strategic alliances, and the moment you're no longer useful, you'll be discarded. That's enough, Andre said, but Katerina swept away. Abigail's hands were shaking. Is she right? Is that what this is? Yes, that's exactly what this is. I told you that from the beginning. Except now I'm wondering what... Because I'm starting to suspect it has everything to do with me being black. Yes, that's part of it. Not because I care about such distinctions, but because the people in this room do. My being here with you challenges certain assumptions. Is that what you wanted to hear? You're using me to make a point. I'm compensating you generously to play a role. I've been transparent. If you're only now questioning the ethics, that's a failure of imagination on your part. He wasn't wrong. I need some air, Andre nodded. The terrace, I'll give you 10 minutes. Abigail walked through the indicated doors. The terrace was cooler, the city spread out below. She gripped the balustrade, trying to sort through her emotions. First time, she turned to find a man standing nearby, younger than most people inside, perhaps 35, with an easy smile. He held 2 glasses of champagne, offering one. That obvious, she accepted the glass. Only to someone who's been there. Dmitry Sokolov, old friend of Andrei's, though he'd dispute the friend designation. Which are you, asset or liability? Depends on the day. You're Abigail, the mystery woman who's got half the room speculating. Dmitry leaned against the balustrade. Andrei doesn't trust easily. Actually, he doesn't trust at all. He calculates. But that's not because he's cold. It's because he's protecting himself from caring. He learned young that caring makes you vulnerable. So he's built this fortress of detachment, and mostly he's right. Mostly. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw how he looked at you when Katerina was cruel. It wasn't the look of a man protecting an asset. It was the look of a man who's angry someone hurt someone he's starting to care about, which means you're in danger, though probably not the kind you're worried about. Before Abigail could respond, Andre appeared. Leave. Dmitry raised his glass in mock salute. As he passed Abigail, he murmured, Good luck, you're going to need it. Andre approached slowly. What did he say? That you're more complicated than you pretend. Dmitry has always been prone to romantic delusion. Are you ready to go back inside? Do I have a choice? You always have a choice. If this is too much, say so. You keep the money, we part ways. It wasn't simple. Somewhere in the last hours, something had shifted. I'm ready. Let's finish this. Returned, and Abigail made it through. When they finally left, the car ride was silent. At her building, he walked her to the door. You did well. The next one will be easier. Andre, what Dmitry said about you caring, is there any truth? For just a moment, something cracked in his facade. Exhaustion, loneliness. Then it was gone. Dmitry sees what he wants to see. I see what's real. And what's real is that caring is a luxury people like me can't afford. It'll save you pain. He left, and Abigail stood watching the car disappear, wondering why his words felt less like warning and more like plea. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Every few days, Andre would text details for the next event. A dinner with international business associates at an exclusive restaurant where the menu had no prices. A gallery opening where contemporary art hung on walls, and Abigail found herself discussing symbolism with collectors who treated culture like currency. A private concert at a wealthy patron's estate where musicians played for an audience of 30 people in a room that could have held 300. Each time, Abigail played her role, but she was also learning. Learning to read the subtle hierarchies in how people position themselves around Andre. Learning to identify who held real power versus who merely performed it. Learning that wealth operated according to rules that were never spoken but always enforced. Despite his insistence that he was exactly what he appeared to be, Abigail saw the cracks in Andre's careful facade. Small things at first. The way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when someone mentioned family obligations. The slight shift in his posture when conversations turned to childhood memories, as if his body was preparing for impact. The care with which he ensured she was never left alone with anyone he deemed potentially threatening, his attention always tracking her location, even when he appeared absorbed in other conversations. Their conversations, too, were evolving beyond the immediate logistics of their arrangement. After a particularly exhausting charity auction, where Abigail had watched wealthy people bid obscene amounts on items they didn't need, Andre had asked her opinion about effective philanthropy. Not as a test, but as if he genuinely valued her perspective. They'd spent an hour in the car discussing the difference between charity that made donors feel good and support that actually created lasting change. Andre had listened with the same intense focus he brought to business negotiations, occasionally challenging her assumptions but never dismissing her ideas. After one particularly challenging evening, where a drunk businessman had cornered Abigail near the coat check and made inappropriate suggestions while his hand lingered too long on her lower back, Andre had personally ensured the man's company lost a significant contract within 48 hours. The businessman's firm had been negotiating a partnership with one of Andre's subsidiaries, a deal worth millions. It disappeared overnight. When Abigail discovered what had happened and asked why he'd bothered with such a drastic response, Andre had simply said, "Because it was necessary. People need to understand that disrespecting you carries consequences." The businesslike tone couldn't quite hide the anger underneath. Abigail had seen it in his eyes that night, when he'd appeared beside her within seconds of the man's transgression. Cold fury, tightly controlled but absolutely lethal in its intensity. He'd said 3 quiet words to the businessman, words Abigail couldn't hear, and the man had gone pale and immediately left the event. But Abigail was learning to read the things Andre didn't say, the emotions he worked so hard to suppress. She saw the anger he controlled so carefully, the way his hands would flex slightly when someone crossed an invisible line. She saw the protective instinct he refused to acknowledge even as he demonstrated it constantly, positioning himself between her and potential threats with reflexes so ingrained they seemed unconscious. She saw the loneliness that surrounded him like a moat, keeping everyone at a careful distance even as they orbited his power and influence. She saw, too, how people reacted to him, the mix of fear and respect that colored every interaction. The way conversations would pause when he approached, then resume with artificial brightness. The careful distance everyone maintained, as if they understood instinctively that getting too close to Andrei Volkov was dangerous, though the nature of that danger remained deliberately vague. During their 4th event together, a fundraiser for a museum expansion, Abigail had watched a man approach Andre with obvious nervousness. Their conversation had been brief, conducted in low tones that suggested privacy despite the crowded room. The man had left looking relieved, and later Abigail learned his daughter's medical expenses had been quietly covered by an anonymous donor. When she'd asked Andre about it, he changed the subject with practiced ease. These glimpses of who he was beneath the controlled exterior fascinated Abigail more than they should have. She'd agreed to play a role, to maintain professional distance while collecting her compensation. But somewhere in the careful navigation of his world, she'd started to actually see him. Not the intimidating figure others perceived, but the man who'd built elaborate defenses against a world that had hurt him young and taught him to trust nothing and no one. The worst was the night someone tried to use her as leverage. She was leaving the bookstore, later than usual because they'd been doing inventory, when a car pulled up beside her on the quiet street. 2 men got out, both wearing the kind of expensive suits that suggested they worked for someone with resources. They were polite but firm, suggesting she should come with them. There were questions their employer wanted answered about her relationship with Andrei Volkov. Nothing to worry about, they assured her. Just a conversation. Every instinct Abigail had screamed danger. She refused, her voice steady despite the fear climbing her spine. Tried to walk away, pulling her phone from her pocket. One of the men grabbed her arm, not roughly but with clear intent to prevent her escape. His grip was professional, the touch of someone trained in controlling people without leaving obvious marks. Before she could scream, before she could even fully process what was happening, 3 of Andrei's people materialized from the shadows. They moved with terrifying efficiency, and within 30 seconds the would-be kidnappers were on the ground, disarmed and immobilized. No guns were drawn, no violence beyond what was absolutely necessary to neutralize the threat. But the message was unmistakable. Abigail was protected. One of Andrei's men, a man named Victor who she'd seen at several events, approached her with careful respect. "Are you injured, Miss Wright?" Abigail shook her head, still processing the speed with which the situation had been resolved. "I'm fine, but I didn't know you were there. I didn't know anyone was watching. Mr. Volkov's instructions were clear. Your safety is our primary responsibility." Victor gestured to a car that had appeared at the curb. "We should get you home. Mr." Volkov has been notified and will want to speak with you." The drive to her apartment was quiet, her mind racing through implications she'd been avoiding. Andre hadn't just hired her for appearances. He'd assigned her a full security detail, people whose job was watching her movements, protecting her from threats she hadn't even known existed. The realization was equal parts comforting and infuriating. Andre was waiting outside her building when they arrived, leaning against his car with his phone to his ear. When he saw her, he ended the call mid-sentence and crossed to her in 3 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. "No, I'm fine. Your people were there before anything could happen." Leaf flickered across his features, there and gone in an instant. Then the mask slid back into place. "Good, Victor will file a report. The men have been identified and will be dealt with appropriately through legal channels. You won't be bothered by them or their employer again." Abigail stepped back from his touch, needing distance to think clearly. "You never told me about the security detail." "No, I didn't." "Why not?" Andre was silent for a moment, choosing his words. "Because you would have objected. You would have insisted you could handle yourself, that you didn't need constant protection. And you would have been right, to a point. But I don't operate on to a point. I operate on certainty, and the only way to be certain you're safe is to take measures you'd consider excessive." "You should have told me," Abigail said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "You should have given me the choice to accept or decline that level of surveillance. Instead, you made a decision about my life without consulting me, which is exactly the kind of controlling behavior I was trying to avoid when I set my boundaries for this arrangement." "You're right," Andre said quietly. "I should have told you. I chose not to because I prioritized your safety over your autonomy, which was wrong. I apologize." The apology surprised her. Andre didn't strike her as someone who admitted mistakes easily. "Just an apology, that's it. What else would you like me to say? That I'll remove the security detail and leave you vulnerable to people who see you as a tool to leverage against me? I won't do that. I can't do that. But I can be transparent going forward about the measures I'm taking to keep you safe." They stood on the sidewalk, the night air cool against Abigail's skin, while she tried to sort through the tangle of emotions. Anger at his presumption. Gratitude. Fear at how casually violence had almost touched her life. And underneath it all, that growing awareness that Andre's feelings for her had evolved beyond the transactional arrangement they'd initially agreed to. "I need to know something," Abigail said finally. "Tonight, when Victor called you when you came here, was that about protecting your asset, or was it about something else?" Andre's jaw tightened, and for several heartbeats he didn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It was about the fact that when I got the call that you were in danger, I stopped breathing. That for approximately 90 seconds before Victor confirmed you were safe, I experienced a level of fear I haven't felt since my mother died. That's not about protecting an asset, Abigail. That's about caring for someone in a way I promised myself I never would again." The raw honesty in his admission hit Abigail like a physical force. This was what Dmitri had tried to warn her about. Not that Andre was dangerous, but that he was becoming vulnerable. And vulnerability, for someone like him, was terrifying. They fought about it. Their first real fight, standing on a quiet street in the middle of the night, voices raised, frustrations aired that had been building for weeks. Andre's terror of losing someone else he cared about. His conviction that controlling every variable was the only way to prevent tragedy. Abigail's exhaustion with being treated like she needed constant protection, like she was fragile rather than resilient. Her insistence that she deserved agency over her own life, even when that agency came with risk. Neither was willing to concede completely. Andre couldn't promise to stop protecting her in ways she might find excessive. Abigail couldn't promise to accept that protection without question. They reached an impasse, both frustrated, both unable to find. Andre left that night with tension in every line of his body, and Abigail went to bed angry and confused about what she actually wanted from this increasingly complicated situation. But the next morning, Andre arrived at her apartment with coffee and pastries from the bakery she'd mentioned loving, but could rarely afford. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled in a way that made him seem more human and somehow more appealing. "I have a proposal," he said without preamble. "Compromise. I maintain the security detail because removing it would make me incapable of functioning, knowing you were vulnerable. But you're fully informed of their presence and protocols. You meet the team. You have direct communication with them. In exchange, you attend self-defense training with my people. Not because I don't trust them to protect you, but because you deserve to feel confident in your own ability to. And we establish clear communication. If something happens, if you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, or if you simply want to know what measures are in place, you tell me immediately. No filters, no consideration for whether you think I'm being overprotective. You tell me, and we address it together. It was the together that made Abigail agree, because it suggested partnership rather than unilateral protection, mutual responsibility rather than one-sided control. It wasn't perfect. Andre was still making decisions based on his need for certainty rather than her need for autonomy, but it was progress. It acknowledged that they were both navigating unfamiliar territory, learning to balance care with respect for independence. 6 months into their relationship, and it was a relationship now, regardless of how either of them tried to frame it otherwise, Andre invited Abigail to dinner at his apartment. Not an event with other people present. Not a public appearance that served some strategic purpose. Just the two of them, which they'd carefully avoided since that first emotionally charged night in the library when everything had almost shifted between them. She arrived to find he'd cooked. Actually cooked with his own hands, not ordered in from an expensive restaurant or hired a private chef the way he easily could have. The meal was simple by the standards of the world they'd been inhabiting. Pasta with a sauce that had clearly taken hours to perfect. Salad with vegetables he'd apparently selected himself from a farmer's market. Bread he'd somehow managed not to burn despite what he admitted was his first attempt at baking. But the effort was what mattered. Andre, who controlled million-dollar negotiations without breaking a sweat, who moved through the world's most exclusive spaces with absolute confidence, was visibly nervous about whether she'd like his cooking. He watched her take the first bite with an expression of cautious hope that made her heart ache with its vulnerability. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing more easily than it ever had in public settings. Abigail told him about her expanding plans for the literacy center, ideas she'd been developing with surprising input from financial advisors Andre had quietly connected her with. He told her about his mother, stories he'd never shared before, painting a picture of a woman who'd loved literature and learning, and had dreamed of being a teacher before circumstances had trapped her in a different life entirely. After dinner, they moved to the library, that one room where Andre seemed able to fully lower his guard. Abigail was examining a book when Andre spoke. "I need to tell you something, and after you may decide you don't want this anymore. You're scaring me again. There's an investigation, federal. They've been building a case for 2 years. Financial crimes, money laundering, tax evasion, racketeering. They're going to prosecute aggressively. Are you guilty?" "Of some of it, yes. My business requires operating in gray areas. They have enough to make a case. It means trials, media attention. Anyone close to me will be investigated. They'll try to pressure you into testifying. You need to make a choice. Walk away now and I'll protect you from fallout, or stay knowing it could damage your reputation, your career, your future. If I stay, what happens? I don't know. Best case is settlement, minimal jail time. Worst case is years in prison. Either way, it won't be easy. And us, Andre finally turned from the window. In his eyes was raw hope. If you stay, we figure it out together. But Abigail, you need to understand, I care about you. More than I've cared about anyone since my mother. That's not strategy, it's true. And because it's true, I can't ask you to risk everything. You should walk away. But you don't want me to. No, but what I want and what's best for you aren't the same. Abigail crossed. Here's my choice. I stay, not because I'm naive. I stay because despite everything, I trust you, and I trust that what we have is worth fighting for. You'll regret it. Maybe, but I'd regret walking away more. Andre pulled her close, desperate and careful. I love you. I wasn't going to say it, but you're staying despite everything, which means you deserve to know. I love you, Abigail, and I'm terrified it's going to destroy us both. Then we'll be destroyed together. But I think we're stronger than you're giving us credit for. The investigation moved forward. Indictments were filed. Media descended. Abigail's name appeared in articles, always suggesting she was somehow complicit. She lost the bookstore job. Corporate had concerns about publicity. Her position at the community center was more secure, but she felt judgment in colleagues' eyes. The trial was brutal. Prosecutors painted Andre as ruthless. Defense countered with evidence of legitimate businesses, jobs created, philanthropic work. Both sides had truth. Abigail attended every day. She didn't testify, but her presence was a statement. a quiet refutation that he was nothing more than his worst actions. The verdict was mixed. Guilty on some charges. Sentencing would likely be 2 to 5 years. Abigail visited Andre after the verdict. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "The judge will see you as evidence. Let them think what they want. I'm here because I love you, and you're going to need someone to remind you this isn't the end. It's not fair to you. Life isn't fair, but we have choice in how we respond. I choose survival. I hope you do too." Andre was quiet. Then, "I want to use the time before I report to establish the literacy center, in your name, with funding that can't be challenged. It's the one good thing I can do. Andre, please. Let me know something positive came from this. I need that." "Okay, we'll build it together. And when you're gone, I'll keep building. And when you come back, it'll be waiting." "You're not going to wait for me." "Yes, I am, because what we have doesn't stop being real just because circumstances force us apart. I'm committed, Andre." The next months were dedicated to building the center. Andre threw himself into the project, transforming an abandoned library into something. The center opened 3 weeks before Andre's sentencing, 4 years in federal prison. Abigail stood beside him at the hearing, showing the judge Andre wasn't the monster painted. Their last night together was quiet. No dramatic declarations. They simply held each other, finding peace in presence. "Thank you," Andre said as dawn approached. "For seeing me, for staying. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me." When it was time, Abigail drove him to the facility. They sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Then Andre kissed her with tenderness that broke her heart and put it back together. "I love you. Thank you for teaching me what that means." "I love you too. Come back to me." "I will." The months that followed established new patterns: weekly phone calls, monthly visits, letters where Andre's handwriting grew more confident as he found words for feelings he'd suppressed. He told her about classes, about mentoring other inmates, about therapy where he worked through trauma. He was changing, growing. Abigail told him about the center's success, about lives being changed, about kids who showed her second chances were possible. 2 years passed, then 2.5. The parole board granted early release. 6 more months in a halfway house. Abigail was there the day he was released. She dressed simply, honestly. She'd changed too, groans. She'd never stopped missing him. Andre emerged looking different, leaner, softer in the eyes. When he saw her, his controlled expression crumbled. He crossed to her, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home. They stood holding each other, crying without shame. "Hi," he said. "Hi yourself. I missed you every day." "I missed you too, but we're here now." "What happens now?" "Now we go to the center. The kids have been asking when you'd be back. Then we figure out. One day at a time. One day at a time, I can work with that." They walked toward her car, toward the life they'd built separately and would rebuild together. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be challenges, but they'd faced harder things. As they drove through the city, passing the old diner, Andre smiled, real, unguarded. "I never did get those eggs I ordered. We could stop, see if Marcus is still there. I'd like that." They parked and entered together. The same worn booths. The same smell of coffee. Marcus was still behind the service window. He saw them and grinned. "Well, look who finally came back. About time, young man." "I'm sorry, but I'm here now, and if she'll have me, I'm not going anywhere." Marcus looked at Abigail. "What do you say, baby girl? You keeping him?" Abigail looked at Andre, at this man who'd taught her about strength and vulnerability and complicated love. Who'd given her resources to build something meaningful while learning to build something within himself. Who'd kept his promise. "Yeah, I'm keeping him." They sat in the corner booth where it all started. This time, no secrets, no calculations. Just 2 people who'd found each other and refused to let circumstances define them. They ordered breakfast, and they talked about the future with cautious optimism. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, Andre and Abigail sat together, building something new from everything they'd survived. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real and honest and worth fighting for. And sometimes that was enough. Hey loves, this story isn't really about money, power, or even rescue. It's about dignity, about being seen when the world keeps trying to overlook you. If this ending made you pause for a second, then thank you for staying with me until here. I'll be back soon with another story. Until then, take care of yourself. Bye for now.